Today we're going to look at main idea and the moral of a story, which is also the theme. I'm going to read the Little Red Riding Hood to you, and I want you to see if you can figure out what the main idea or central idea of the story is and the theme of the story. So again, this is titled Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time there was a little village girl who was as sweet as sugar and as good as bread. Her mother loved her very much, and her grandmother was even fonder of her. This kind grandmother had made her a pretty red cloak with a hood, in which the child looked so bright and gay that everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother made some cakes and said to her, "Go, my child, and see how your grandmother is. I hear she has been ill. Take her one of these cakes and this little pot of butter." So Little Red Riding Hood set out at once to see her grandmother, who lived in another village. As she walked through the woods, she met a big wolf. He would have gobbled her up then and there. But some woodcutters were nearby, and he did not dare. But he did ask her where she was going. The little girl did not know it was dangerous to talk to a wolf. So she said, "I am going to my grandmother to take her this cake and little pot of butter." "Does she live far off?" asked the wolf. "Oh, yes," answered Little Red Riding Hood. "She lives beyond the mill, you see, way down there at the first house in the village." "All right," said the wolf. "I'll go and visit her too. I will take this way and you take that way, and we'll see who gets there first." Soon the wolf arrived at the grandmother's cottage and knocked at the door. Tap, tap. "Who is there?" "It is your own Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf, masking his voice sound as much like Little Red Riding Hood's as he could. The good old woman, who wasn't feeling well and so was in bed, called out, "Pull the string, my dear, and the latch will fly up." The wolf pulled the string and the door opened. He sprang upon the poor old grandmother and swallowed her all in one gulp, for it was more than 3 days since he had had a bite. He did not feel very well after that, but he shut the door, put on the grandmother's cap, and stretched himself out in the old woman's bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood. By and by, Little Red Riding Hood came knocking at the cottage door. Tap, tap, tap. "Who is there?" At first, Little Red Riding Hood was frightened at the hoarse voice of the wolf, but she made up her mind that her grandmother must have a cold. "It is your own Little Red Riding Hood," she answered. "I have brought you a cake and a little pot of butter which Mother has made and sent you." Then the wolf called out, softening his voice as well as he could, "Pull the string, my dear, and the latch will fly up." Little Red Riding Hood pulled the string, and the door opened. When the wolf saw her come in, he hid himself under the bedclothes and said, "Put the cake and the little pot of butter on the shelf and come here." And so Little Red Riding Hood put the cake and butter on the shelf and went over to see the wolf. She was very much surprised to see how strange her grandmother looked in her nightclothes, and said, "Grandmother, what great arms you have!" "The better to hug you, my dear." "Grandmother, what great ears you have!" "The better to hear you, my child." "Grandmother, what great eyes you have!" "The better to see you, my child." "Grandmother, what great teeth you have!" "The better to eat you." With these words, the wicked wolf fell upon poor Little Red Riding Hood. And there the story ends. Nobody knows just what happened. Some say that the woodsmen were so nearby, cutting trees, that they heard Little Red Riding Hood scream and came running just in time to save her. And they say, too, that when the woodsmen cut the wolf open, there they found the grandmother, whole and sound. So now I want you to write in your journal what you think the main idea or the central idea and the theme of Little Red Riding Hood is.